She knocked on a stranger's door in the middle of winter, already ready to hear no. What happened after that changed both of their lives forever. You don't have to. I know. The girl said it before the man could even decide how to respond. Her voice was quiet, steady in a way that didn't fit her age, as if she had practiced those words many times before. She stood on the wide stone porch of the house, barely reaching the door handle, wrapped in a red dress that looked too thin for the freezing night. A red knitted hat sat low on her forehead, strands of blonde hair escaping around her ears, damp with melting snow. Her blue eyes were lifted toward him, not demanding, not accusing, just waiting. Michael Harper froze in the doorway. He had opened the door expecting nothing more than silence, maybe the wind, maybe a delivery mistake. Instead, there was a child standing alone in the snow. No adults nearby. No car idling at the curb. Just the quiet street, the cold air, and a little girl who looked like she had already learned how to be careful with hope. I just wanted to ask, she continued softly, her fingers curling into the fabric of her sleeves. Can I warm up at your place? Just for a little while. Michael didn't answer immediately. He studied her face, the red cheeks, the lashes clumped together from tears she clearly hadn't let fall. He was a man used to control, to locked gates and security cameras, to a life where nothing unexpected crossed his threshold without permission. Yet here she was, having crossed something far more difficult than a gate. How long have you been outside? He asked at last. She hesitated, then shrugged, as if the answer didn't matter. A while, she said. It's okay. I can stand it. The way she said it made his chest tighten. Children weren't supposed to talk like that. They weren't supposed to measure cold against pride, or ask for warmth as if it were a favor too big to expect. Michael stepped aside slightly, letting some of the heat spill out onto the porch. The girl noticed immediately, her shoulders relaxing just a fraction, though she didn't move forward. You don't have to let me in, she said quickly. I understand. He looked down at her, really looked this time, and realized she was trembling. Not dramatically, not enough to draw attention, but in a quiet, controlled way, as if she refused to give the cold the satisfaction of winning. What's your name? He asked. Lily, she replied. Lily, he repeated. Where are your parents? Her gaze dropped to the ground. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer at all. They died, she said finally. And they were going to send me to a children's home. I heard them talking about it. Michael felt the words settle heavily in the space between them. So I left, Lily added, almost apologetically. I didn't want to be a problem. Snow continued to fall behind her, soft and relentless. Michael glanced past her again, scanning the empty street, the dark houses, the complete absence of anyone who might come looking for her. You shouldn't be out here, he said quietly. I know, Lily answered. That's why I knocked. Something inside him shifted then, subtle but undeniable. This wasn't a child who had wandered off. This was a child who had made a decision because she saw no other option. Michael opened the door wider. Come inside, he said. Lily didn't move right away. She looked at him carefully, as if checking whether the words were real. Are you sure? She asked. You don't have to. I know, he replied. But you're freezing. That was enough. She stepped inside slowly, her boots leaving small wet marks on the floor, her body still tense as if she expected the warmth to disappear at any moment. Michael closed the door behind her, shutting out the cold night, unaware that in doing so, he had just opened something far larger than his home. The warmth of the house wrapped around Lily the moment the door closed, and she stopped just inside the entryway as if crossing another step might be a mistake. The heat felt almost overwhelming after the cold, making her fingers tingle painfully as sensation returned. She hugged her arms around herself, her shoulders rising defensively, unsure where to stand or what she was allowed to touch. Michael noticed immediately. He removed his coat and hung it by the door, then knelt down in front of her so he wouldn't tower over her. "You can take your shoes off if you want," he said calmly. "You're not doing anything wrong." Lily hesitated, then slowly unlaced her boots with stiff fingers. When she stepped out of them, her socks were damp and thin. Michael frowned slightly and gestured toward the hallway. "I'll get you something warm," he said. She nodded, watching him carefully as he disappeared for a moment and returned with a thick sweater and a pair of wool socks. She accepted them with both hands, murmuring a soft thank you, her eyes wide with disbelief as if she were afraid the kindness might vanish if she acknowledged it too loudly. As she changed, Michael busied himself in the kitchen, filling a kettle and placing a mug on the counter. The small, ordinary sounds felt strange in the quiet house, as though the space itself wasn't used to sharing air with anyone else. When he handed Lily the mug, she cradled it carefully, breathing in the steam before taking a cautious sip. "It's hot," she said, more surprised than complaining. "That's the idea," Michael replied gently. She smiled faintly, then quickly looked down, as if smiling too much might be inappropriate. They moved into the living room, where Lily perched on the edge of the couch, keeping her feet tucked beneath her dress. Michael sat in a chair across from her, leaving space between them, though the silence began to stretch uncomfortably. "Can I ask you something?" Lily said after a moment. "Yes," he replied. "Are you going to call someone?" she asked. "To take me away?" Michael paused, choosing his words carefully. "I might call someone later," he said honestly. "But not to send you back outside. Not tonight." Lily nodded, absorbing that distinction with visible effort. "That's okay," she said. "I just wanted to know." The way she accepted uncertainty so calmly unsettled him. "Do you have anyone else?" he asked. "A friend, a relative?" She shook her head. "There was an aunt," she said. "But she said she couldn't take care of me. She said it would be better if professionals did." The word professional sounded too big in her mouth, borrowed from adults who spoke about her as if she weren't listening. Michael leaned forward slightly. "And how did that make you feel?" he asked. Lily thought about it seriously. "Like I was something heavy," she said. "Something people had to carry." Michael felt something twist painfully inside his chest. "You're not heavy," he said firmly. "You're just a kid." She studied his face, searching for something, then nodded slowly, though doubt still lingered in her eyes. The clock on the wall ticked softly, marking time in a way that suddenly felt important. Outside, the wind howled faintly, reminding Lily how cold the night still was beyond the walls. "I'm sorry for knocking so late," she said suddenly. "I didn't know where else to go." Michael shook his head. "You did the right thing," he replied. "You found a door and you asked." Lily wrapped her hands more tightly around the mug, warmth seeping into her palms. "Most doors don't open," she said quietly. Michael had no answer for that. Instead, he stood and fetched a blanket, draping it gently over her shoulders. Lily stiffened for a second, then relaxed as the weight settled, her body finally giving in to exhaustion. "You can rest here for a while," he said. "Nothing bad is going to happen tonight." She nodded, her eyelids growing heavy, and for the first time since she had stepped onto his porch, Lily leaned back against the couch, allowing herself to believe, even just for a moment, that the night might end differently than she had feared. Lily didn't fall asleep right away, even after the blanket warmed her shoulders and the quiet of the house settled around them. She sat curled on the couch, staring at the patterns in the rug as if they might shift into something familiar if she watched long enough. Michael moved through the space carefully, aware of every sound he made, the clink of a spoon in the sink, the soft click of a light switch, each noise seeming louder than it should have been in a house that had grown used to solitude. After a while, he returned to the living room and sat down again, not too close, not too far, allowing the space to remain hers. Lily glanced up at him, her blue eyes thoughtful, measuring. "Is it always this quiet here?" she asked. "Most of the time," Michael said. "I used to like it that way." "Used to?" she repeated, curious. "I'm not sure anymore," he replied honestly. She nodded, as if that made sense, and pulled the blanket higher around her shoulders. The warmth had reached her bones now, and with it came a strange heaviness, the kind that followed relief after fear had been held too long. Her eyelids drooped, but she fought it, straightening slightly as if sleep might be taken from her if she surrendered to it too easily. "If I fall asleep," she asked quietly, "will you wake me up if someone comes?" "Yes," Michael said without hesitation. "I'll wake you." She considered that answer carefully, then leaned back again, trusting the certainty in his voice more than the words themselves. Minutes passed, marked only by the ticking clock and the steady rhythm of her breathing as it finally slowed. When she did fall asleep, it was sudden and complete, her small body relaxing all at once as though it had been waiting for permission. Michael watched her for a long moment, struck by how different she looked now. Without the tension in her shoulders and the careful control in her posture, she looked like what she was meant to be, a child, worn out and vulnerable, deserving of softness rather than survival. He adjusted the blanket gently when it slipped, careful not to wake her, and then stood, uncertain what to do next. He went to his study and opened a drawer he rarely touched, pulling out an old photo he hadn't looked at in years. It showed him much younger, standing in front of a modest house with a woman whose smile had once been the center of his world. He remembered how quiet that house had been too after she left, how he had mistaken emptiness for peace and control for safety. The memory settled heavily, uncomfortable in its familiarity. A small sound drew his attention back to the living room. Lily had shifted in her sleep, murmuring something he couldn't quite understand, her brow furrowing as if she were arguing with a dream. Michael returned immediately and sat beside the couch, resting a hand lightly on the armrest, close enough to be felt but not intrusive. "It's okay," he said softly, unsure whether she could hear him. "You're not outside anymore." Her expression smoothed, and the tension eased from her face. She slept on, deeper now, and Michael stayed where he was, the minutes stretching into hours. He didn't check his phone. He didn't think about meetings or messages or the life that waited beyond these walls. Instead, he stayed awake through the night, listening, watching, making a quiet promise to himself that whatever came next, he would not be another door that closed without warning. When dawn finally crept in through the windows, pale and hesitant, Lily stirred and opened her eyes slowly. For a split second, confusion flickered across her face, then recognition followed, and with it a cautious relief. "It's morning," she whispered. "Yes," Michael said. "You made it through the night." She sat up, blanket slipping into her lap, and looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time in daylight. Then she looked at him, something fragile and hopeful resting in her gaze. "Thank you for opening the door," she said. Michael nodded, feeling the weight of those words settle into him in a way he knew would not fade. "You were brave enough to knock," he replied. "That mattered." Lily smiled faintly, the smallest curve of her lips, and in that quiet moment between night and day, something began that neither of them could yet name, but both would soon learn they could never undo. Morning changed the house in subtle ways. Light softened the sharp lines of the furniture, and the silence no longer felt empty but tentative, as if the walls themselves were waiting to learn a new routine. Lily sat at the kitchen table with a cup of warm milk in front of her, both hands wrapped around it even though it had already cooled. She watched Michael move around the kitchen, opening cabinets, pausing as if surprised by his own uncertainty. "I don't usually make breakfast," he admitted after a moment. "I usually forget." "That's okay," Lily said. "My mom forgot sometimes too." The way she said it wasn't sad, just factual, and that somehow made it harder. Michael turned away briefly, pretending to focus on the stove, giving himself a second to steady his breathing. When he brought the toast to the table, Lily thanked him carefully, the same way she had thanked him for warmth and shelter, as if gratitude were a form of protection. After breakfast, Michael suggested a shower so she could fully warm up. Lily hesitated at the doorway of the bathroom, looking at the tiled floor and the neatly folded towel he had placed there. "I can do it fast," she said. "I won't use much water." "You don't have to rush," he replied. "And you don't have to earn anything." She nodded, though the words still seemed foreign to her. When she came out later, her hair damp and combed with careful fingers, she looked lighter somehow, as if layers of the night had finally been washed away. They sat together in the living room afterward, the daylight making everything feel more real, less like a temporary shelter and more like a place where decisions had to be made. Lily swung her legs gently, then stopped and looked at him. "What happens now?" she asked. Michael had been asking himself the same question since before sunrise. "Now," he said slowly, "we figure things out. Together." She seemed to consider that, then nodded. "Are they still going to send me away?" she asked quietly. The question was not emotional, not dramatic, just direct, and it landed with weight. "I'm going to talk to people," Michael said honestly. "But you're not going anywhere today." "Today," Lily repeated softly, then looked down at her hands. "That's still okay." Michael realized then how carefully she lived inside time, dividing it into manageable pieces so hope wouldn't overwhelm her. They left the house later that morning, bundled against the cold. Lily stayed close to him on the sidewalk, matching her steps to his without realizing it. At a small cafe near the corner, Michael made a phone call while Lily sat at the window, watching people pass by. She didn't wave or smile at anyone, but she watched with interest, as if observing a world she might one day belong to again. When they returned home, Michael spoke with a lawyer on the phone, his voice low but firm. Lily sat on the rug nearby, drawing with pencils he had found in a drawer he didn't remember owning. She drew a door first, tall and solid, then erased it and drew it again, this time slightly open. That afternoon, a woman from social services arrived. Lily retreated immediately, sitting closer to Michael than before, her body tense. Michael noticed and placed his hand on the arm of the chair between them, close enough for her to touch if she needed to. The questions were careful and kind, but Lily answered them with the same guarded politeness she used with everyone new. When the woman finally left, Lily let out a breath she seemed to have been holding since the doorbell rang. "Did I do okay?" she asked. "Yes," Michael said. "You did more than okay." She nodded, accepting the reassurance, then hesitated. "You're still here," she said. "So are you," he replied. As evening approached, Lily sat by the window again, watching the sky darken. The snow had stopped, leaving the street quiet and still. "I thought I would be colder," she said suddenly. "When I knocked." Michael looked at her. "I was very cold," she continued. "Not just outside." He understood then that she wasn't talking about the weather. "You're warm now," he said gently. She nodded, leaning back against the couch, exhaustion finally returning in a gentler form. Yes, she said. For now. Michael watched her eyes close again, and for the first time, the words "for now" did not feel like an ending. They felt like a beginning he was no longer afraid to step into. The following days unfolded with a careful slowness, as if both of them were afraid that moving too fast might break something fragile they had only just discovered. Lily learned the shape of the house by heart, the way the hallway light flickered for a second before turning on, the quiet hum the refrigerator made at night, the spot on the couch where the cushions dipped slightly under her weight. Michael watched her adapt with the quiet focus of someone who understood that adjustment did not mean comfort, at least not yet. Lily continued to ask permission for everything. To sit on a different chair. To open a drawer. To turn on the television. Each question came with the same careful tone, as though she were testing invisible boundaries. Michael answered patiently every time, reminding her again and again that she didn't need to ask, that nothing she was doing was wrong, even when he could see she didn't fully believe it yet. One evening, while Michael was working in the study, Lily stood in the doorway holding a small object in both hands. She waited until he noticed her, then stepped forward. "I found this," she said, offering it to him. It was a framed photograph, slightly dusty, turned face down on a shelf he rarely touched. Michael froze when he saw it. The image showed him years ago, standing beside his parents, all three of them smiling in a way that now felt distant and unreal. "I'm sorry," Lily added quickly. "I didn't mean to look." Michael took the frame gently. "You don't have to apologize," he said. "It's okay." She hesitated, then asked the question that clearly mattered more. "Are they gone too?" Michael nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "A long time ago." Lily absorbed this quietly, then sat down on the floor beside the desk. "That's why it's so quiet," she said, more to herself than to him. The observation surprised him with its accuracy. That night, Lily had another bad dream. This time she didn't knock. She stood silently in the doorway of Michael's bedroom until he woke on his own, sensing her presence. When he sat up, she was already hugging her arms tightly, her face pale and tense. "I didn't want to wake you," she whispered. "But I couldn't stop thinking." Michael pulled the blanket back slightly. "Come here," he said. She hesitated only a moment before climbing onto the edge of the bed, sitting stiffly as if unsure she was allowed to relax. Michael stayed awake beside her, not touching her unless she leaned closer on her own, which she eventually did, resting her head against his arm. "Do people disappear even when they promise they won't?" she asked quietly. Michael took a long breath. "Some people do," he said honestly. "But not everyone." "How do you know who stays?" she asked. "You watch what they do," he replied. "Not just what they say." She nodded, storing the answer away. The next day brought more phone calls and more paperwork. Michael spoke with lawyers, with social workers, with people who used careful language to describe painful realities. Lily listened from nearby, pretending to draw while paying attention to every change in his tone. When the word "temporary" came up again, she flinched almost imperceptibly. That evening, Michael sat beside her on the couch. "I need to tell you something," he said. Lily straightened immediately. "You're not in trouble," he continued. "But things might feel uncertain for a while." She nodded. "They always do," she said quietly. Michael turned toward her fully. "But you're not alone," he said. "And I'm not planning on walking away." She studied his face carefully, longer than before, as if committing it to memory. You don't say, forever, she observed. He smiled faintly. No, he admitted. But I show up every day. Lily considered that, then leaned back against the couch, her shoulders relaxing slightly. That's better than promises, she said. Michael watched her as she grew drowsy, her trust forming not through grand gestures, but through consistency, through warmth, through the quiet understanding that sometimes safety was built slowly, one ordinary evening at a time. The shift happened gradually, in ways that were easy to miss if you weren't watching closely. Lily began to leave small traces of herself behind without realizing it. A sweater draped over the back of a chair instead of folded away immediately. A drawing taped to the refrigerator with careful precision. Shoes left by the door rather than lined up perfectly beside it. Each small change felt like a quiet experiment, as if she were testing whether the space would still accept her if she relaxed her grip on control. Michael noticed all of it. He also noticed the nights were still hard for her, even when the days felt lighter. Some evenings she seemed calm and talkative, asking questions about how the house worked, how long he had lived there, what his job actually was. Other nights, she withdrew into herself, growing quiet without explanation, her gaze drifting toward the windows as if listening for something only she could hear. One night, after dinner, Lily followed him into the study and sat cross-legged on the floor, watching as he sorted through documents. She stayed silent for a long time, too long to be casual. "Can I ask something?" she said finally. "You don't have to ask permission to ask," Michael replied, setting the papers aside. She smiled faintly at that, then grew serious again. "If they decide I have to go somewhere else," she said carefully, "will you tell me before it happens?" The question was steady, but her hands betrayed her, fingers twisting together in her lap. "Yes," Michael said without hesitation. "I won't let you find out by accident." She nodded, relief flickering briefly across her face. "That's good," she said. "I don't like surprises." He understood that more deeply than she knew. The next day brought another visit from social services, this time longer, more detailed. Lily sat at the dining table with a puzzle, pretending to focus on it while clearly listening to every word. Michael answered questions calmly, honestly, refusing to minimize the responsibility or dramatize his intentions. When asked why he was willing to take this on, he paused longer than expected. "Because she knocked," he said simply. "And because I opened the door." The woman nodded, writing something down, her expression softer than before. After she left, Lily stayed quiet for the rest of the afternoon. When Michael finally asked if she wanted to talk, she shook her head and retreated to her room, closing the door gently behind her. He didn't follow immediately. He waited, remembering that trust also meant allowing space. That evening, he found her sitting on the floor, surrounded by drawings. One in particular caught his attention. It showed a small red figure standing in front of a very large door, snow falling all around. The door was open, light spilling out from inside. "Is that you?" he asked softly. Lily nodded. "And this?" he asked, pointing to the doorway. "That's when I stopped being cold," she said. Michael sat down beside her. "You were never wrong for knocking," he said quietly. She looked at him, eyes shining but dry. "I know," she said. "I just didn't know if anyone would answer." That night, Lily didn't wake from a nightmare. She slept through until morning, sprawled diagonally across the bed, one arm flung over a pillow. When Michael checked on her before going to bed himself, he paused in the doorway longer than usual, struck by how peaceful she looked when she wasn't bracing for loss. In the morning, she came into the kitchen still half asleep and, without thinking, wrapped her arms around his waist for a brief second before freezing. "I'm sorry," she said immediately, stepping back. I forgot. Michael knelt in front of her, meeting her eyes. You don't have to be sorry for that, he said gently. You didn't forget. You trusted. She stared at him, processing the difference. Is that allowed? She asked. Yes, he said. Here, it is. She nodded slowly, then leaned forward again, this time more carefully, resting her head against his chest. Michael stayed still, letting the moment last as long as she needed. For Lily, it was the first time she allowed herself to believe that warmth didn't always have to be temporary. For Michael, it was the moment he understood that this was no longer about offering shelter. It was about choosing to stay, every day, without waiting to be asked. The call came on a gray afternoon when the house felt unusually still. Lily was at the table working on a puzzle, her tongue caught slightly between her teeth in concentration, while Michael stood by the window speaking quietly into his phone. He kept his voice low, but Lily had learned how to listen without appearing to. She felt the change in the air before she understood the words. Yes, Michael said finally. I understand. When he ended the call, he didn't turn around right away. Lily watched his reflection in the glass, the way his shoulders tightened, the way he exhaled slowly as if preparing himself. Is something wrong? She asked. Michael turned to face her and walked over, pulling out the chair across from her but not sitting down yet. There's something we need to talk about, he said carefully. Her hand stilled on the puzzle piece she had been holding. She didn't ask what. She waited. They found a relative, Michael continued. A distant one. Someone who might want to take responsibility. The word responsibility landed hard. Lily nodded once, her face carefully blank. Do they want me? She asked. Michael hesitated just long enough for her to notice. They want to talk, he said honestly. That doesn't mean anything has been decided. Lily looked down at the table. That's how it always starts, she said quietly. With talking. Michael felt the weight of that sentence press into him. I won't let anything happen without you knowing, he said firmly. And I won't let anyone make this easy for themselves by ignoring what you need. She nodded again, absorbing the words without reacting outwardly, but that night she barely touched her dinner. Later, when Michael checked on her, he found her sitting on the bed fully dressed, her backpack open beside her. What are you doing? He asked gently. She froze. Nothing, she said too quickly. Then, after a pause, just being ready. The sight of the backpack hit him harder than he expected. You don't need that, he said quietly. Lily shook her head. They always say that, she replied. Until they don't. Michael sat down beside her. Look at me, he said. She did, reluctantly. No one is taking you away tonight, he said. Or tomorrow. Or without a fight. Her eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. I don't want to be heavy, she whispered. You're not, he said immediately. You never were. The meeting with social services happened 2 days later. Lily sat in the waiting room with a woman who spoke kindly but kept glancing at the clock. Michael was inside another room, answering questions, stating his intentions clearly, refusing to soften them. When he finally came out, Lily stood up so quickly her chair tipped backward. Well? She asked. Michael knelt in front of her, his expression tired but steady. They're not moving you, he said. Not now. And they can't without my consent. Lily stared at him, processing. So I stay? She asked. Yes, he said. You stay. The breath left her in a quiet rush. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She simply leaned forward and rested her forehead against his shoulder, her small hands gripping his coat as if anchoring herself to something solid. That night, she didn't take out her backpack. She left it in the closet, zipped closed, pushed all the way to the back. And when Michael passed her room later, he saw her sleeping with her arms stretched freely across the bed, no longer curled inward, no longer ready to run. For the first time since she had knocked on his door in the cold, Lily allowed herself to believe that staying was not a temporary state, but something that could be chosen for her, and with her, at the same time. The house felt different by the time spring arrived, not because anything dramatic had changed, but because the tension that once lived in every corner had quietly loosened its grip. Sunlight stayed longer in the rooms now, warming the floors in the afternoon, catching on the drawings taped to the walls and the small fingerprints Lily no longer tried to wipe away. The space had stopped feeling borrowed and had begun to feel lived in. Lily noticed it before Michael did. She stopped flinching when the doorbell rang. She stopped checking his face every time he answered a phone call. Some nights she still woke up briefly, sitting up in bed to listen, but she no longer got dressed or reached for her backpack. She would simply lie back down, pulling the blanket closer, trusting that morning would come and that she would still be there when it did. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Lily was drawing quietly on the floor while Michael read nearby. She suddenly looked up, studying him with the same serious focus she had the night they met, though her eyes were calmer now. "You didn't send me away," she said. Michael lowered the book. "No," he replied. "I didn't." "You could have," she continued. "Lots of people would have." "Yes," he said honestly. "They would have." She nodded, accepting the truth without bitterness, then returned to her drawing. When she finished, she brought the paper to him. It showed a house with a red roof, smoke rising from the chimney, and two figures standing in the doorway. One was small, wearing a red hat. The other was tall, colored in blue. "That's us," she said simply. Michael looked at the drawing for a long moment. "I like where we're standing," he said. "Me too," Lily replied. The final court date came quietly, without drama. Michael stood firm, answering every question with clarity and patience, while Lily waited outside, swinging her legs and humming softly to herself. When he returned, he didn't need to say anything. She saw it in his eyes before the words arrived. "It's done," he said. "You're staying. For good." Lily blinked. "For, really?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Really." She didn't cry. She didn't jump or laugh. She stepped forward slowly and wrapped her arms around him, holding on in a way that wasn't desperate anymore, but certain. "I won't say you don't have to," she whispered. Michael smiled and held her close. "Good," he said. "You don't need to." That night, Lily placed her red hat on a hook by the door instead of keeping it close to her bed. She left her door open as she slept, the light from the hallway soft and steady, no longer something to fear. Weeks later, on a warm evening, they stood on the porch together watching the sky darken. Lily leaned against the railing, her hair moving gently in the breeze. "I was really cold when I knocked," she said thoughtfully. Michael nodded. "I know. But I wasn't just cold outside," she added. "I think I was cold inside too." He rested a hand on her shoulder. "And now?" She smiled, small but sure. "Now I'm warm," she said. "All the way." Michael looked out at the quiet street, remembering the night she had stood there in the snow, already prepared to accept rejection. He understood then that opening the door hadn't just saved her from the cold. It had changed both of them. Sometimes the bravest thing a child can do is knock. And sometimes the bravest thing an adult can do is open the door, and never close it again.